Hash the Princess at the Edge of Evening. Hash a story for deep sleep and dreaming. Hash Part 1. Hash Chapter 1, Arrival at the Balcony. The day has been long and the palace has been full of gentle sound, the soft murmur of voices in distant halls, the rustle of silk along stone corridors, the occasional note of a stringed instrument drifting up from some inner courtyard where musicians played for no one in particular, simply because the evening called for music, and the evening always received what it asked for in this ancient and unhurried place. And now at last the final bell of the day has rung, not a sharp or startling bell, but a deep, resonant one cast from bronze that has aged for centuries in the palace tower, a bell whose sound does not so much strike the air as settle into it, folding through the warm dusk like water finding its own level, slow and sure and complete. You heard it from your chamber, where the last of the handmaidens had draped a light shawl of ivory wool across your shoulders before slipping quietly from the room, and the sound of the bell told you what the light was already beginning to suggest, that it was time, that the day was finished, that the evening had begun, and that the balcony was waiting for you, as it always waited, patient and open and cool. You moved through your chamber slowly, without hurry, your bare feet finding the warm stone of the floor, smooth and familiar beneath your soles, polished by generations of footsteps into a surface so worn and loved that it holds the warmth of the day long into the night, radiating it back upward in soft, invisible waves that rise through your feet and into your legs and settle somewhere deep in the center of you like a stone placed into still water. The chamber is softening around you, the bright clarity of afternoon already dissolved into something amber and gentle, the light coming now only from the small clay lamps that rest in their niches along the eastern wall, 3 of them, each one a low and steady flame, each one casting a circle of honey-colored warmth against the plastered wall, so that the room flickers at its edges but remains calm at its center, the way all good rooms do, the way this room always has for as long as you can remember. You pause a moment near the low cedar table where a clay cup of cool water waits for you, as it always does at this hour, placed there by hands you know and trust, and you lift it and drink slowly, feeling the water move through you, clean and quiet, tasting faintly of the deep stone well from which it came. A well so old that some say it was dug before the palace itself was built, in a time when this hilltop was bare and the kingdom was still only a dream in the hearts of the people who would one day make it real. You set the cup down softly and turn toward the balcony door, which stands open, as it is always left open for you at this hour, the long gauze curtain that hangs before it moving in a barely there breeze, breathing in and out with a motion so slow and so steady that it seems to have a pulse of its own, a slow and restful heartbeat that belongs to the evening itself. The curtain is the color of old cream, sheer enough that you can see the fading sky beyond it, a sky that is doing something extraordinary right now, as it does every evening and yet somehow seems to do for the first time every time you witness it. It is turning, slowly and without any hurry, from the warm deep gold of late afternoon into something more complex and more tender. A gradation of color that passes through amber and rose, and a very soft mauve that exists only for a few minutes at this precise hour. A color with no proper name that you have ever heard, only this color, only here, only now. You reach out and let the gauze curtain pass through your fingers as you move through it, and it is as light as breath, as soft as the inside of a petal, and it trails behind you for a moment as you step forward, as if the room itself is reluctant to release you, as if the chamber wants to hold you a little longer in its warmth before surrendering you to the open air. And then you are on the balcony and everything opens. The first thing you feel is the air, and the air is everything at this hour. It carries within it the last warmth of the sun, which has already dropped below the western hills, but which has left its warmth behind in the stone and the soil and the old wood of the olive trees below. And this stored warmth rises now in a slow and gentle exhalation, meeting the cooler air that is beginning to descend from the higher reaches of the evening sky, and where these two currents meet, the warm rising from the earth. The cool descending from above, there is a particular softness, a particular quality of air that you cannot feel anywhere else but here, on this balcony, at this hour, in this kingdom. It moves across your face like something that has intention behind it, something that means to be kind, and you close your eyes for just a moment and let it touch you. The way you let the sun touch you sometimes when you stand in the gardens below, with your face turned upward and your eyes closed and no particular thought in your mind, simply receiving, simply being in the warmth, simply existing in a moment that is asking nothing of you except that you be present in it. You open your eyes. The balcony is made of white marble that was quarried from mountains so far to the north that the journey of each block of stone took many weeks by river barge and ox cart, and this marble has the quality of holding light in an unusual way. It does not simply reflect light as a mirror does, but seems to absorb it slightly before releasing it, so that in the evenings the balcony floor gives off a soft luminescence of its own, a pale and gentle glow that seems to come from within the stone itself. From some memory of light it has accumulated over long years of mornings and noons and evenings, and this glow is never brighter than it is right now, in this hour of transition, when the sky above is still lit and the lamps below have not yet been raised to their full brightness, and the marble holds the light of both, the last of the sky and the first of the lamps, in one quiet, luminous surface beneath your feet. You look down at your feet on this marble, at the stone around them, at the way the stone meets the low carved balustrade that runs along the outer edge of the balcony in a series of softly curved columns, each one carved by a craftsman whose name is long forgotten, but whose care for the work is still visible in every curve, every smooth joint, every small floral motif that appears at the base of each column as a kind of signature, a quiet statement of pride. A reminder that this palace was made by human hands that loved what they were making. You move to the balustrade and place your hands on it, and the marble is cool and smooth under your palms, and you feel it, truly feel it, the way you sometimes forget to feel things in the busyness of the day. Truly feel the coolness of the stone against the warmth of your skin, the slight roughness of the carved edge of the balustrade against the side of your palm, the solidity of it, the way it does not move, the way it has not moved in centuries and will not move for centuries more, this old and patient stone that has held the hands of so many before you, that will hold the hands of so many after you, and that holds yours right now without any judgment or expectation, simply solid, simply cool, simply present. And you feel yourself settle into this feeling, the coolness in your hands, the warmth of the air at your face, the stone beneath your feet, the sound of your own breathing, which you now become aware of and which is slower than you thought it was, slower and deeper, already finding the rhythm of the evening without being asked. You stand there a moment, just standing, just breathing, just resting your hands on the old stone, and letting your weight fall slightly forward and your shoulders drop away from your ears. And something in you that has been held tight all day without your quite knowing it begins to release very slowly, the way a held breath releases, not all at once, but in a gradual, quiet exhalation that seems to come not just from your lungs, but from somewhere deeper, from somewhere you don't have a name for. From the part of you that carries things that are too small and too numerous to name, all the small tensions and small decisions and small worries and small efforts of a long and full day, all of them beginning now to soften and loosen and drift away on the evening air, as natural and as easy as leaves drifting from a branch in autumn, not falling in anguish but simply releasing, simply finishing their time in the tree and moving on into the air below, and you watch them go, these small accumulated things. And you feel lighter with each one that goes, lighter and quieter and more completely yourself, more completely here, more completely in this moment on this balcony at this hour at the edge of evening in the kingdom that lies below you, waiting to be seen. The shawl around your shoulders is the right weight for this hour, not too warm, not too light, exactly right, as the women who care for you have always known how to make things exactly right without being asked, a quiet expertise born of long attention and deep care. You pull it slightly closer across your chest, not from cold but from comfort, the way one pulls a shawl close not against anything external, but simply because the act of gathering something soft around you feels good, feels like a small and private kindness you offer yourself, and you rest your forearms on the balustrade and lean forward very slightly, and you look out at the kingdom below, and what you see is this. The world is going to sleep. Not yet fully asleep, not yet at the deep and dreaming place that the night will eventually carry it to, but moving in that direction, leaning toward it the way you lean toward something you love and trust, with a willingness that has no resistance in it, a willingness that is really just another word for peace. The sky above the western hills is doing its slow and magnificent work of changing, the last gold of the sun now concentrated into a narrow band just above the horizon, deep and almost orange at its brightest point, shading upward through amber and then through a softness that is somewhere between gold and green. A color so brief and so beautiful that it seems almost shy, as if it knows it will not last and has decided to be graceful about that. To be simply itself for the moments it has, and then to let the blue come, the deep and deepening blue that is already claiming the higher sky. already spreading downward from the zenith in a slow tide of gathering darkness that is not the darkness of loss but the darkness of arrival, the darkness that carries stars within it, the darkness that is itself a kind of light, quieter and more patient light, a light that asks you to slow down and look more carefully, and when you slow and look, you begin to see it, the first stars, appearing now not all at once but one by one, tentative and singular, each one arriving in the darkening dome above like a small announcement, like a quiet voice saying simply, "Here, here, here." You breathe in. The air tastes of something green and something sweet and something mineral and old, the gardens below, the stone of the palace walls, the river somewhere in the distance, all of it arriving in the air at your face and entering you with each breath. And you think in a drifting and unbounded way, not in a structured or purposeful way, but simply as a thought that passes through you like light passes through water. You think that breathing the evening air of this place is something that has happened more times than you could count. That it is one of the most repeated and yet somehow most singular experiences of your life. That every evening the air is slightly different, slightly warmer, slightly cooler, slightly more laden with the scent of jasmine or of rain or of the distant grain fields after harvest, and yet every evening it is also exactly this, exactly the same air, the same evening, the same balcony, the same slow permission to stop, to arrive, to rest, to be simply and completely here. Your eyes close again without you deciding to close them, just for a breath, just for a moment, and behind your eyelids the last light of the evening sky makes a warm reddish glow that pulses very gently with your heartbeat. And you notice your heartbeat, and it is slow, it is already slow, already finding the pace of the evening, already settling into the rhythm of this place and this hour. And you let it slow even further, not by doing anything, not by trying, but simply by noticing it. Simply by being aware of it, and the awareness itself is enough. The awareness is the thing that allows the slowness, and you feel it, feel your heart slow and settle and deepen, feel your breath become more complete. Feel the evening wrap around you in its warmth and its coolness together, in its last light and its first darkness together. And you are held between these things, between day and night, between warmth and cool, between waking and the long and restful approach of sleep. And it is the most comfortable place you have ever been, this place between, this place at the edge, this place on the balcony at dusk where everything is both and neither, where the world is in transition, and the transition itself is so beautiful that you want to stay in it forever. You open your eyes again and the kingdom is waiting for you, patient and vast and gentle, spread out below the balcony in all its evening beauty. And you let your gaze move across it slowly without hurry, the way your hand might move across the surface of still water. Gently, with no intention to disturb, with only the intention to feel, to know, to be in contact with the surface of a world that is going quietly and willingly and beautifully to sleep, just as you will eventually go to sleep, but not yet. Not yet. First there is this, first there is the evening, and the kingdom, and the balcony, and you. Chapter 2, The Kingdom Below. The palace sits on a rise of ancient ground, a hill that has been inhabited for so long that the hill itself seems to have accommodated itself to human presence, to have accepted the weight of walls and towers and gardens, and the accumulated life of countless generations with a kind of geological patience that borders on affection, as if the earth here has grown fond of what has been built upon it, as if the roots of the palace go as deep as the roots of the old trees in the lower garden, as deep as the water table, as deep as the memory of the place. From the balcony, this rise of ground gives you a vantage that feels like a gift every time you take it, a gentle elevation that allows you to see without being seen, to look out over the kingdom in the way that a bird looks out from a high branch, not with any sense of dominance, for there is nothing of dominance in how you hold yourself, nothing commanding or surveying, but simply with the quiet privilege of height, the way height opens the world. The way it allows the eye to travel distances that the foot could never cover in an evening, to roam freely over rooftops and gardens and river bends and distant hills in the time it takes to draw a single slow breath. And what you see as your gaze travels outward from the palace walls is a world that is in the gentle process of becoming itself, of becoming its evening self, its quieter and more inward self, the self it always arrives at when the day's business has concluded, and the streets have emptied of their commerce and their noise and their movement, and what remains is what was always beneath all of that, the essential, abiding quality of a place that has been lived in with love for a very long time. The streets of the palace quarter are narrow and irregular, following the organic logic of paths that began as the natural desire lines of people walking from one place to another, not planned, not measured, not imposed by any geometric will, but simply worn into existence by the repeated passage of human feet over many generations, finding the easiest way around an outcropping of rock here, curving slightly to pass near a water source there. Widening naturally at a corner where people had a habit of stopping to speak to one another, narrowing again where two old walls had slowly leaned toward each other over the centuries until they nearly touched. These streets are paved with flat, irregular stones of a pale, warm color sandstone, most of it from the quarries to the south, and in the evening light these stones take on a warmth and richness that makes them seem almost golden, each one a slightly different shade, each one worn smooth at its center and rougher at its edges, glowing. Now in the last of the skylight and in the first of the lamplight, with a beauty so unassuming and so genuine that it catches at something in you every time you see it. The lanterns are beginning to come on. This is the thing that happens at this hour that you have loved since you were a very small child standing at your mother's side on this same balcony, gripping the edge of the same balustrade with small hands, watching with wide eyes as the lamplighters made their rounds through the streets below. This is the thing that has never lost its quality of quiet magic, no matter how many times you have witnessed it, no matter how many hundreds of evenings you have stood here and watched it unfold. The lamplighters move through the streets on their ancient route, a route as old as the lantern posts themselves, each man carrying his long lighting staff with its protected flame at the top, moving at a walking pace that is unhurried but purposeful, touching the flame to each lantern in turn with a gesture that is almost ceremonial. A gesture that has been made so many thousands of times that it has become something more than a practical action, something closer to a ritual. Something that carries within it the weight of all the evenings that have come before and all the evenings that will come after, each small flame a link in an unbroken chain of evening light stretching back through the years to a time before living memory. And the lanterns respond, they catch the flame and hold it, each one finding its steadiness within a few seconds. The flame inside each glass and iron housing settling from its initial flicker into a warm and regular burn that makes the glass glow with a deep amber light. And this amber light falls on the stone below each lantern in a pool that seems almost to have weight, to be something poured rather than emitted. Something liquid and warm that spreads across the paving stones in soft, irregular circles that just barely overlap with the circles of the next lanterns along the street. So that walking through the lantern-lit streets below must be something like walking through a series of warm rooms, each one amber and enclosed and then briefly shadowed between and then amber and enclosed again. A rhythm of light and shadow and light that carries its own kind of comfort, its own kind of reassurance. From up here on the balcony, you can see this happening across the whole of the quarter of the town, the lamps catching, one after another, in a spreading pattern that moves outward from the palace gates in slowly widening circles, and each new lamp that comes on adds its small note to a composition of warm light that is building very gradually, very steadily, toward the full illuminated evening that the town will wear through the deepest hours of the night. And as this happens, as the lanterns come on, the streets below seem to settle into themselves in a new way, as if the light itself is a kind of containment, a gentle marking of the space. And within this contained and lamp-warmed space, the last few figures moving through the streets below seem to move with less urgency than they did an hour ago. They are moving toward home, toward their evening meals, toward the warmth of their own rooms and their own lamps, and their pace has the quality of completion in it. The quality of a thing that is coming to its natural end and is content with that ending. Beyond the near quarter, further down the slope of the hill, the town continues to unfold in its evening transformation, and your eye travels there now, moves outward over the rooftops of the buildings that crowd the slope below the palace walls, rooftops of many different materials and many different ages, some of red clay tile in the manner of the southern style, some of flat, pale stone laid in overlapping courses like scales. Some of older and darker material that you cannot quite identify from this distance, but that gives certain buildings a quality of great age, a quality of having been there long enough to have grown into the hillside, to have become as natural as the rock beneath them. On some of these rooftops there are small gardens, clay pots of herbs and flowers arranged along the low parapets, or occasionally a more ambitious arrangement of climbing plants that have been encouraged to spread over a wooden trellis until they cover an entire rooftop in a canopy of green that, even at this hour in this fading light, still holds some quality of growing life, some suggestion of the photosynthetic dream that happens quietly and without any drama in every leaf, day after day. Year after year, And on a few of the larger rooftops you can see, very small in the distance, the shapes of people, a figure sitting in a chair, another standing at a parapet, two people close together, perhaps speaking, perhaps simply sitting in companionable silence in the evening air, sharing the same sky, the same warmth of the day's end, the same soft approach of the night. There is a garden between the palace walls and the first row of town buildings, a garden that was planted generations ago as a kind of transitional space, a place that is neither entirely of the palace nor entirely of the town, but belongs to both and to neither, a public garden in the most genuine sense, belonging to whoever comes to it, whenever they come, in whatever state of mind or heart they arrive, the garden receiving them all with the same indiscriminate generosity, the same absolute patience, the same offer of green and quiet, and the sound of water from the fountain at its center. This fountain is old, older than the garden perhaps, for there are stories that say a spring once rose here naturally from the ground, and that the fountain was built to honor and contain this spring, to give it a proper form, and that the water in the fountain still comes from this same source deep in the rock below, still carries within it whatever mineral quality or underground journey, gives it that particular clarity and coolness that people have commented on for as long as anyone can remember. The fountain basin is circular, made of the same pale marble as the palace balcony, and it is wide enough that 3 or 4 people could stand around it with space between them. And the water that flows into it from the central column does so in a continuous arching stream that catches the last of the skylight and the first of the lantern light as it falls, so that the arc of water is lit from within seemingly, or lit from without by everything at once, and the sound of it, even from up here on the balcony, even at this distance, is just barely audible, a soft, continuous whispering sound, a sound of water in perpetual motion, a sound that has not stopped for as long as the fountain has stood, a sound that continues through the deepest hours of the night when no one is in the garden to hear it, continues through the early hours of the morning before anyone has come, continues in rain and in dry heat, in summer and in winter. In times of celebration and in times of mourning, the fountain not distinguishing between these times, not caring for the difference, simply flowing, simply sounding, simply offering its water and its sound to whoever happens to be near enough to receive them. The garden is emptying now as it always empties at this hour. The families who came in the late afternoon to let their children run on the gravel paths, the older people who came to sit on the stone benches and watch the water, the young people who came to walk the perimeter of the garden in the circuit that has been worn into the gravel by generations of young feet, all of them are going home now, drifting out through the garden gates in 1s and 2s. And the garden receives their departure with the same equanimity with which it received their arrival, already beginning to settle into its evening mode, a different quality of stillness than the stillness between moments of activity in the day, a deeper stillness, a more intentional quiet, as if the garden itself is taking a long, slow breath after the movement of the day and finding the breath a relief, a pleasure, something looked forward to and now gratefully arrived at. The trees in the garden are coming into their evening presence. There are old pines along the western wall whose dark canopies are now silhouetted against the last of the colored sky, in a way that makes them seem almost mythological, not trees as you know them in the daylight, not the ordinary familiar daylight trees with their texture of bark and the individual needles you could touch, but something more archetypal, something that stands for tree in the way that a symbol stands for a thing, simplified into essence, into pure form against a colored sky. Beautiful in their silhouette the way a calligrapher's brushstroke is beautiful, with a beauty that comes from the completeness of the form, from the sureness of its edges against the sky. And among these pines there are other trees, fruit trees, mostly old and gnarled by many seasons, their branches twisting in directions that no young tree's branches twist, shaped by years and by wind and by the patient intentions of the gardeners who have tended them. And these trees have dropped their summer fruit and are moving into the bare-limbed austerity of the coming season, though in this evening light their bare branches have a delicacy to them, a fineness of line, that is as beautiful in its way as the fullness of summer leaf. Among the trees, a few birds are settling for the night. You can see them, tiny dark shapes, moving with that particular quality of movement that birds have at nightfall, purposeful and quick, finding their places in the branches with small adjustments and small sounds that drift up to you as the faintest imaginable suggestion of birdsong, more a memory of birdsong than the thing itself, the last few notes of a language that has been speaking all day long and is now drawing toward its evening silence. Further out past the garden and the outer walls of the palace quarter, the town extends in a way that you know well but can only partially see from here. You know it from the years of walking through it, from the memories accumulated over a lifetime of moving through these streets at all hours and in all weathers. And so what you can see from the balcony is always augmented and deepened by what you know and remember, the two things working together the way a melody works with its harmony. Neither one complete without the other, both together making something richer and more whole than either could be alone. You can see the roofline of the market district, though the market itself has long since closed for the day. The colored awnings that cover the stalls have been rolled up and tied, and the tables have been cleared and the goods packed away, and the sounds and smells that define the market in its full daylight life have subsided into an echo, a residue, a suggestion. But even in its closed state, the market district has its own beauty from up here. The geometry of its roof lines, the variety of its building heights, the occasional tower of a storage building rising above the general level of the rooftops like a modest landmark, like a quiet anchor for the eye in the larger field of the town. In the streets of the market district, too, the lanterns are coming on, and from this distance the effect of the lantern light spreading through those streets is something like watching a slow fire. Not a destructive fire, nothing hurried or alarming, but the fire of warmth, the fire of light, of amber-colored illumination spreading through a network of streets in a way that makes the whole district look, from up here, like something glowing from within. Like a thing that is lit by its own inner warmth rather than by external flame, as if the town itself is generating this light, as if the warmth of all the lives lived within it has accumulated over time into something visible. Something that the evening calls forth from the streets the way the evening calls forth the stars from the sky. The river is visible from the balcony when you know where to look for it. It does not announce itself, does not catch the light dramatically or make a movement against the landscape that would draw the eye immediately. But once you find it, once your eye learns the shape of it, it is there, unmistakably there, a silver thread woven through the darker fabric of the evening landscape, curving in a long and gentle arc to the south, and then bending eastward toward the place where it disappears behind the low hills that bound the valley. The river is not wide, not here, not in this part of its course. It widens considerably further south, where the valley opens and the flat ground of the plains begins, but what it lacks in width it compensates in its quality of presence, in the quiet authority with which it moves through the landscape, the sureness of its course. The way it has carved and shaped the valley over thousands of years with a patience so vast as to be incomprehensible to any individual human life, and yet somehow. When you look at the river in the evening light, intuitively understood, felt in the body rather than grasped by the mind, the way certain truths are felt rather than understood. There are small boats on the river still, 2 or 3 of them, their dark hulls low in the water, moving slowly downstream in the gentle current. And even at this distance you can see the pole or the oar of each one catching the last light as the boatmen make their final passages of the day, moving with the same unhurried purpose as everything else in this evening landscape, carried by the river as the river is carried by the slope of the land, as the land is carried by its ancient geological structure. Everything carrying everything, everything held within something larger than itself. Beneath the river, where the valley floor is flattest, the grain fields spread out in a long pale expanse that is the color of old straw now, the harvest long completed, the fields empty and resting in the way that fields rest after a harvest, with a quality of satisfied exhaustion, of having done what they were made to do, and now settling into the quiet of the fallow season. In the daylight, these fields have a particular beauty, a landscape-scale beauty, a beauty of horizontal extent and open sky. But in the evening, in this softening light, they take on a different quality, something more intimate, something that draws the eye not to the large gesture of the landscape, but to the small details within it, the particular way the low evening light rakes across the stubble of cut grain and makes each individual stalk cast a tiny shadow, so that the field becomes a texture of gold and shadow at once, a surface so complex and so fine that it would take hours to describe and yet registers in the eye instantaneously, as a single impression of textured, softly lit beauty. And beyond the fields, at the edge of the visible world from this balcony, the hills rise not dramatically, not with any quality of steepness or challenge, but gently, gradually, in the way that hills rise in old and settled landscapes, as if the land has had time to round its edges, to soften its angles, to arrive at a shape that is as comfortable as a long-inhabited room. These hills are covered in low-growth, scrub and occasional trees, mostly olive and carob, and the low aromatic plants that fill the air with their particular scent in certain conditions of wind and warmth, and in the evening they are going dark, slowly and unevenly, the westward-facing slopes still catching the last traces of daylight while the eastern slopes have already fallen into the first real shadow of the night. And this unevenness of light gives the hills a three-dimensional quality. A sense of volume and substance that is more pronounced at this hour than at any other time of day, as if the evening light is performing a last service to the landscape before surrendering it to the dark, illuminating its forms from a low angle to reveal their depth and their fullness in a way that the overhead light of noon never could. You have been looking out at all of this for some time now. Time has been passing in the way that time passes on this balcony, which is to say that it has been passing without your quite noticing it, without the usual markers and measures that make time feel like a commodity to be tracked and managed, and instead passing the way time passes in a dream or the way water passes in a river. You know it is moving, you can feel it moving. And yet the movement is so natural and so continuous that it does not feel like loss, does not feel like the running out of something, but simply like the natural and proper progression of a world that knows what it is doing and is doing it well. The sky has continued to deepen while you watched. The last gold at the horizon has now given way to a deep rose. That itself is now at its most intense point, at its richest saturation of color just before it too begins to fade into the blue that is coming from above, the deep and patient blue of the night sky. And in this rose light, the landscape below has taken on a quality almost otherworldly in its beauty. Everything touched by this light looks briefly sacred, briefly transformed, briefly lit from within by something that is almost but not quite ordinary light. Something that ordinary light aspires toward on its best evenings and occasionally achieves for a few minutes at dusk before the blue arrives and the world becomes itself again, its plain and beautiful everyday self, lit by stars and lanterns and the slow white rising of the moon. There are sounds from below that come and go on the air like thoughts, the sound of a gate closing somewhere, a solid and unhurried sound that carries clearly in the evening air and then is absorbed into the general quiet. The sound, barely audible, of a woman's voice calling something from a window or doorway, a single call, short and clear, the voice of someone calling in a child or calling a greeting to a neighbor. A sound so ordinary and so human and so full of the texture of daily life that it catches at something in you. Some recognition, some sense of the thousands of such calls that have been made from thousands of such windows at thousands of such evening hours across the long life of this place. Each one small and quickly finished, each one part of the continuous fabric of a community going about its evening in the natural way that communities always have. And beneath all of this, beneath the occasional closing gate and the distant voice and the sound of the fountain and the sound of your own breathing and the almost inaudible beginning of the night insects in the garden below, beneath all of this there is a sound that is not quite a sound, or rather a sound that is made of so many sounds layered together at such a low level that it becomes something more like a quality of the air than a distinct auditory experience. The sound of the town at rest, the collective low murmur of a place that is alive and inhabited and settled into its evening. A sound so familiar and so continuous that you have lived your whole life in its presence without quite noticing it until a moment like this, a moment of particular stillness and attention, when the quieting of other things allows this underlying hum to become perceptible. And when it becomes perceptible, it is not noise but music, not music that anyone wrote or plays or intends, but music in the oldest sense, in the sense of a pattern of sound that carries meaning in its patterns, that says something about the world it comes from. And what it says in this case is something simple and something vast. That there are people here, that they are living, that they are going quietly to sleep, that they are content. The moon is not yet risen, but you can feel its imminence in the sky above the eastern hills, a faint brightening there, a suggestion of something coming, the way the world brightens imperceptibly before the sun itself appears above the horizon, only softer, only cooler, only more patient in its approach. The moon will take its time. The moon always takes its time. And you are content to wait for it here, on the marble of the balcony, with the shawl around your shoulders and your hands resting on the cool stone of the balustrade, and the evening arranging itself all around you in its unhurried way, and the kingdom below you moving, lamp by lamp and voice by voice and settling bird by settling bird, toward the deep and restful dark. You notice that your shoulders have dropped further, that the small of your back has softened against the posture it held all day, that your jaw has unclenched without your having decided to unclench it, that your breath has found a rhythm so slow and so deep that each inhalation seems to reach the very bottom of your lungs, to fill you from the ground up, the way a vessel fills from the bottom, and each exhalation empties you the same way, slowly and completely. leaving behind a brief and comfortable emptiness that the next breath fills again. You are breathing the evening. You are breathing the kingdom. You are breathing in the smell of cooling stone and distant water and night-opening flowers whose fragrance has not yet fully arrived but is preparing, is gathering, is just beginning to release into the air, a sweetness barely present, barely real, a beginning of sweetness that promises more sweetness to come as the night deepens and the flowers open fully to the dark. You lean a little further on the balustrade and let your chin lower and let your eyes soften so that the view before you becomes slightly less defined, slightly more impressionistic, and in this softer state of seeing the lanterns. Below become points of warm light rather than lanterns with their structural particulars, and the streets become the paths between these lights, and the rooftops become the dark surfaces between and around the lights, and the hills in the distance become a single soft undulating line against a sky that is itself becoming what the night will complete, a dome of deepening blue in which the stars are finding their positions one by one, each one precise and steady, each one burning at its own particular distance. Each one so far away that the light you are seeing left its source before your grandparents were born, before the palace was built, before the kingdom had its name. And yet here it is, that ancient light, arriving now in your eyes on this evening, completing a journey of incomprehensible length to end here, on this balcony, and you're looking as if the whole journey was for this, as if the whole vast and patient travel of that light through all that darkness was in some way for the purpose of being received, of arriving somewhere, of being seen. You breathe in, you breathe out. The kingdom is before you and the sky is above you and the marble is beneath your feet and the shawl is warm around your shoulders and everything is exactly as it should be, exactly where it belongs, and you are here in the middle of all of it, the center of all this gentle and unhurried beauty. And there is nothing required of you right now except this, to be here, to breathe, to see, to feel the stone and the air and the evening and the slow and certain approach of the night. Chapter 3, Deep Immersion, the Beginning. The moon rises without ceremony. There is no announcement, no sudden illumination, no dramatic change in the quality of the night. It simply appears, the very edge of it, a curved line of cool white light at the crest of the eastern hills, so thin at first that you might mistake it for the reflected glow of a lantern on the other side of the hill, or for some quality of the sky itself, some brightness in the atmosphere that precedes the moon in the way that birdsong precedes the dawn, but you know what it is. You have watched it rise from this balcony more times than you can count, and you know the particular quality of this light, this white and patient light that carries within it none of the warmth of the sun, none of the amber and gold of the lanterns below, but instead a clarity of a different kind, a clarity that seems to come not from heat but from distance, not from burning but from reflecting, the moon's light always being borrowed light, always being the sun's light returned, transformed by the long journey through space and the translation off the moon's pale surface into something quieter and more restrained, something that illuminates without insisting, something that lights the world without asking anything of it. And this moon, rising now above the line of the eastern hills, is at or very near its fullness, full or nearly full, its disk almost complete, its curve almost completing itself into the circle that human beings have associated with wholeness and with cycles, and with the passage of time since the earliest days of human noticing, since the first person looked up at the night sky and began to understand that the light above them moved in patterns, that the patterns repeated, that the repetition was something to trust and to celebrate. The marble of the balcony changes when the moonlight reaches it. You notice this gradually, the way you notice all things on this balcony, gradually and without urgency. The marble has been glowing softly all evening in the light of the sky and the light of the lanterns below, a warm and amber-tinged luminescence that suited the evening in its first stages, in its hours of transition and warmth and the last of the sun's inherited light. But now as the moon rises and its cooler, whiter light begins to fall on the balcony floor, the marble shifts, not dramatically, not all at once, but in a gradual and seamless transition from its amber warmth into something cooler and cleaner, something that seems to have more depth to it, as if the moonlight activates something in the marble that the lantern light does not reach, some mineral quality, some crystal structure within the stone that responds to this particular wavelength of light by becoming more itself, by revealing more of its own inner character. The veins in the marble, fine lines of gray and pale gold that run through the white stone in complex and irregular patterns, patterns that map the slow geological processes that formed the stone over millions of years of heat and pressure and transformation. These veins become more visible in the moonlight, more distinct, and the marble becomes not just a white surface, but a surface with a history written in it, history too slow and too vast for any human story, a history of the earth itself, patient and indifferent and beautiful. You look down at your hands on the balustrade and they too are changed by the moonlight. Your skin takes on the same cool luminosity as the marble, the same quality of being lit from without by something that has no color in it, only light, and your hands look to you like something ancient and dignified in this light, like the hands in the paintings that line the inner corridors of the palace, the paintings of figures from the deep past who look out from their painted world with expressions of calm attention. As if they are watching something that requires patience and full presence, something worth looking at for a very long time. The air has shifted too with the moon's rising, or perhaps the shift in the air has nothing to do with the moon. Perhaps it was always coming at this hour. A slow exchange of atmospheric layers that happens every evening and that you are usually asleep before it reaches its conclusion. The cool air from the higher elevations beginning now to descend in earnest, not as a wind, but as a gradual thickening and cooling of the air at the balcony level. A cooling that is not unpleasant, not uncomfortable, but deeply and specifically good in a way that the body recognizes without being told. The way the body recognizes the right temperature of water, or the right weight of a blanket, or the right firmness of a surface to rest upon, recognizing these things not with the mind, but with something older than the mind, something that knows what it needs and recognizes when it is receiving it. The shawl around your shoulders becomes more welcome with each minute now, its wool softer against your skin as the air cools, and you pull it a little closer still, gathering its edges together at your chest, and beneath the shawl you feel the warmth of your own body, a warmth that the shawl contains and protects, a warmth that is entirely your own, self-generated and self-maintained, the steady biological warmth of a living body doing what living bodies do, burning slowly, maintaining their temperature, persisting in their warmth against the cooling of the night. The fragrance of the night flowers is arriving now. It comes in waves in the way that scents often travel on still air, not continuously, but in moments of intensity followed by absence, the absence itself making each return of the scent more noticeable, more lovely, more fully appreciated than it would be if the scent were constant and unvarying. The night-blooming flowers in the garden below have been opening since the light began to fail. This is their nature, these flowers, their particular evolutionary covenant with the night and with the creatures of the night who pollinate them, opening themselves to the dark in a gesture that seems, from the human perspective, almost the reverse of what flowers should do, and yet there is a logic and a beauty in it that is its own kind of rightness. And as they open, they release into the air the particular concentrated sweetness that these flowers save for the night, holding back this sweetness all through the bright hours of the day, as if they know that the dark will make the most of it, that the absence of visual sensation in the night makes every other sense more acute, more receptive, and that a fragrance offered in the dark is a fragrance offered to something more attentive and more grateful than daytime attention can be. The scent reaches you in a wave, jasmine primarily, but jasmine mixed with something else, something that is harder to name, something that has a heavier and more resinous quality, like incense but without the smoke, like the smell of certain old woods but sweeter, like the smell of rain approaching but warmer, like something you have smelled before in a particular moment of particular happiness and cannot quite place but recognize the happiness of when you smell it now. And the recognition of that happiness is itself a happiness, a secondary happiness, a happiness about a happiness, and both of them together in the wave of jasmine and something else that reaches you on the cooling air produce in you a sensation of such complete and encompassing well-being that for a moment everything else, the view, the moonlight, the marble, the distant sound of the fountain, everything else recedes slightly, and there is only this scent, only this sensation. Only this moment of being entirely present in your own body breathing in something unimaginably good. And then the wave passes, the scent diminishes, and everything else returns, the view, the moonlight, the marble, the fountain, and you are back in the fullness of the evening with all its layers, and the memory of the scent is already softening into an anticipation of its return, a gentle expectation that makes the air between waves of fragrance seem itself somehow sweet, somehow prepared, somehow already partaking of the scent that is coming. The fountain sounds differently at night. You have noticed this many times and never been able to fully explain it to yourself. Not only does it seem louder in the relative quiet of the night, which makes simple physical sense, but it seems also to have a different quality, a different texture of sound, as if the water itself changes in the dark, as if the darkness gives the sound of water a dimension it does not have in the day. Perhaps it is simply the absence of the other sounds that fills the daylight hours, the voices and footsteps and animal sounds, and the sounds of craft and commerce and the thousand small sounds of active human community. That allows the fountain to reveal its full complexity, the complexity that was always there but was masked by the daytime noise. Because listening to it now, listening to it carefully, with the particular quality of attention that the evening seems to encourage, you can hear that the fountain is not a single sound but many sounds layered together. The sound of water leaving the central column in its arching stream, which has a particular rushing, pressurized quality. And then the sound of that stream meeting the surface of the basin, which has a different quality altogether, a sharp and crystalline splash that breaks into smaller sounds as the water disperses. And then the sounds of the water moving within the basin, finding its level, swirling slightly as it fills and overflows into the channel that carries it away. And beneath all of these, the sound of water moving in the channel, slower and lower, a murmur rather than a sound, a presence at the lower edge of hearing, barely distinguishable from silence, but there, unmistakably there if you listen with the right quality of listening, the listening that is more a form of attention than an effortful action, the listening that happens when you stop trying to hear and simply allow hearing to occur. You are very still now, not frozen, not rigid, not the stillness of tension, but the stillness of something that has found its right position and is content to remain in it, the stillness of a leaf on still water, the stillness of a stone at the bottom of a clear pool, the stillness of things that are exactly where they belong and have no need or desire to be anywhere else. Your body has been making its slow adjustments all evening, the incremental relaxations and releases that happen when the body is given the time and the space and the permission to let go of the day's accumulated holding. And now this far into the evening, this deep into the quiet, those adjustments have accumulated into something that feels like a different state of the body, not the body of the day, not the body that moved and acted and spoke, performed all the small and large tasks of waking life. But a softer body, a body that has been returned somewhat to itself, that has recovered some quality that the day had covered over without your quite noticing. You feel heavier than you did an hour ago, and lighter too, both at once, heavier in the good way that a body feels when it has let go of effort, when gravity is being allowed to do its work without resistance, when the muscles have stopped holding the body up by force and have instead allowed the bones to do what bones are designed to do, which is to hold the body upright with the minimum necessary effort, with the ease of structure rather than the effort of tension. And lighter because something that was there an hour ago is not there now, not a physical thing, nothing that has weight in the literal sense, but something that the body carries nonetheless, the weight of attention directed outward all day, the weight of being a person in the world among other people, and now here on the balcony with the night coming and the moon rising and the town below settling into sleep, that weight has been set down gently and completely, and what remains is something that might be called your own weight. The weight that is just yours, the comfortable and familiar weight of simply being alive in a body on an evening that is becoming a night. Chapter 3, Deep Immersion, continued. There is a memory that comes to you sometimes on this balcony, not a memory you summon or seek, but one that arrives of its own accord the way certain memories do, the ones that are attached not to specific thoughts but to specific sensory conditions, the memories that live in the body rather than the mind and that the body retrieves when the conditions are right, the way certain smells return you instantly and completely to a moment from long ago, dropping you into the past not as an observer but as a participant, fully present in two times at once. The memory is of being very small, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, and being brought to this balcony at night by your mother, who carried you in her arms because your legs were not long enough for the stairs to the upper level. And she stood here where you stand now, and she turned so that you could see out over the railing, and the town below was lit with lanterns just as it is now, and the moon was somewhere above. You cannot remember exactly where, cannot remember what phase it was in, only that it was there. That the marble was bright with it, that the whole world seemed to you in that moment to be made of light, to be composed entirely of sources of light at different distances. The lanterns near and amber, the moon far and white, the stars further still and barely there, and you were held in your mother's arms which were warm and certain and entirely sufficient. And she said nothing, your mother, she simply held you and let you look, and you looked, and what you understood from the looking, understood not in words. Not in any form that could be spoken, but in the way that children understand the most important things, in the way that goes deeper than words and stays longer than any lesson. What you understood was something about the world being larger and more beautiful than anything you had yet imagined, and about your place in it being small and warm and safe, held in someone's arms at the edge of a great dark beauty, the large world out there, the warm arms here. The lanterns and the moon and the marble and the night air, all of it at once, all of it exactly right. The memory dissolves as gently as it arrived, leaving behind it not sadness but something tenderer than sadness, something that has both loss and gratitude in it and cannot be separated into these components without losing what it is, the feeling you have when something beautiful from the past is returned to you briefly and then returns again to the past. And the returning is itself a kind of gift, evidence that the past has not disappeared but is simply elsewhere, held somewhere in the body or the air or the stone, available to come back when the conditions are right, when the marble is lit with moonlight and the lanterns are amber below and the night air is cool and sweet, and the world is exactly this large and this quiet and this beautiful. You let the feeling rest in you without trying to hold it or analyze it, the way you let water rest in a cupped hand. You know it will not stay. You do not try to make it stay. You simply allow it to be in your hand for as long as it is there, and then you allow it to go. The moonlight is fully arrived now, the moon having cleared the eastern hills entirely and risen to a position where its light falls without obstruction across the whole of the landscape visible from the balcony. And the landscape has been transformed by this light in the way that moonlight always transforms a landscape, which is to say it has been simplified and made more itself, stripped of color, of the particular chromatic complexity that daylight reveals, and rendered instead in a language of luminosity and shadow, of pale and dark, of surfaces that catch the moon and surfaces that do not. And in this simplified language, the landscape has a clarity and a completeness that it somehow lacks in the full complexity of daylight, as if the moonlight is performing an act of editorial reduction, removing what is not essential and leaving only the essential, only the form and the light. Only the curve of the hills and the silver of the river and the pale geometries of the town's rooftops and the dark shapes of the old trees in the garden below and the white surface of the fountain basin catching the moon and giving it back, and all of it together composing something that is less like a landscape and more like a dream of a landscape, something that the dreaming mind might produce when it reaches for the essence of beauty, for the form beneath the form. For the world as it is when no one is watching and it is simply being itself. The stars have increased in number since you last consciously attended to them. You have been aware of them at the edge of your awareness all through the evening, each one arriving one by one as the sky. Darkened, but at some point in the past hour the sky has crossed a threshold, and what was a scattering of individual stars has become a population, a community, a gathering so numerous that it is no longer possible to separate them into individuals, but only to receive them as a whole, as a texture of light across the upper dome of the sky that has its own patterns and its own density and its own particular beauty that is the beauty of abundance, the beauty of more than can be counted. The beauty of a thing that exceeds the mind's capacity to enumerate and must instead be felt, received as an entirety rather than analyzed into parts. The brightest stars, those which appeared first, the ones whose light is strong enough to have been visible even in the early stages of the evening, these are still the most prominent, still the anchors of whatever constellations you learned as a child from the palace astronomer who came on certain evenings to the roof above the upper corridor and showed the children the shapes that human imagination had drawn among the stars, connecting these points of light with the invisible lines of story, giving the sky a human face. Making the vast and the ancient into something that could be carried in the mind and recognized and returned to, the way all naming is a kind of homecoming. You can see these familiar shapes now, the ones you were shown as a child, and in seeing them you feel that same sense of recognition you always feel when you find something you have been looking for without knowing you were looking, a small and wordless satisfaction, a small completion. The balcony has become its most itself at this hour. Through the day it is a functional thing, a platform from which the kingdom can be surveyed, a space for the various formal and informal occasions that bring people to its railing, a transitional space between the interior of the palace and the exterior of the open sky. But at night at this hour, with the moon lighting the marble and the stars filling the sky above and the town below in its deep and amberlit evening quiet, the balcony becomes something more, something that resists the practical category and must instead be understood as a space for something that is neither work nor rest, but is something between and around these things, something that the language of productivity cannot accommodate, space for the kind of attention that is also a form of love. The attention you give to things you love when you simply wish to be in their presence, not to do anything with them or about them, not to change or improve or analyze them. but simply to be near them, to let their nearness work on you, to be changed by the being near in ways too slow and too subtle to track but real, deeply real. The way long exposure to anything beautiful makes the person who has been exposed beautiful in some corresponding way. Your feet on the marble are bare now. You had slippers when you first came out, but at some point in the past hour you removed them, set them quietly against the inner wall of the balcony, and the stone beneath your bare feet has a quality that the slippers prevented, a direct and intimate contact with the surface. The texture of the marble immediately available to your soles, the slight grittiness of the stone's surface against the softness of the foot's skin. The coolness spreading upward through the arch of your foot in a sensation that is simultaneously physical and somehow calming in a way that goes beyond the merely physical. The way certain sensory experiences reach past the surface of the body into something more interior, something that responds to physical sensation the way a tuning fork responds to sound. You shift your weight slightly from foot to foot, feeling the marble change under each foot as your weight transfers, noticing the slight differences in surface temperature between the areas of marble that face the moon and the areas that lie in shadow. The moonlit sections a little warmer than you expected, the shadowed sections cooler, and these small differences feel significant somehow, feel like information. Feel like the balcony communicating something to you through the soles of your feet that it cannot communicate through your eyes, something about the nature of surfaces, about the way light has temperature as well as illumination, about the way the world is always saying more than can be seen. Below, the town is quieter than it was an hour ago, not silent, not the silence of emptiness, but the quiet of a place that has retired within itself, that has moved the center of its life indoors, into the lit rooms and warm hearths and shared meals and the gradual winding down of family evenings, children being settled into sleep, older people moving through their final tasks of the day with the unhurried competence of long habit. The streets are mostly empty now. Here and there a figure moves through the lantern-lit corridors between the buildings. A late walker returning home, a night watchman beginning his rounds, a young person carrying something wrapped in cloth from one house to another, a small and ordinary mission of the kind that the evenings of old towns are always full of, the thousand small services and kindnesses and errands that make a community functional and that are never recorded but are always happening. The infrastructure of care that underlies every visible surface of civilized life. These figures move through the pools of lantern light below you, and you watch them with a feeling that has something of protectiveness in it, and something of tenderness, and something of the profound and wordless satisfaction of seeing a thing work as it was designed to work. Community, place, a town that has organized itself around the needs and rhythms of human life, and that fulfills those needs at this hour in the particular way that evenings fulfill them, which is by offering rest, by offering warmth, by offering the enclosed and amberlit interior world of home against the larger and less defined world of the day. The lanterns in the streets burn at their steadiest now. The evening breeze has fully calmed, or has settled into a pattern of breathing so slow and so gentle that the flames inside their glass enclosures are barely affected, barely moved, each one a steady and contained glow that has found its equilibrium with the night air and will maintain it through the long hours ahead. Some of the lanterns that light the upper streets and the approaches to the palace have colored glass in their frames, not brilliantly colored, not the red and blue and green of festival lanterns, but softly tinted, amber gold and palest green, and a rose that is almost not a color at all, but only a warmth in the light, a suggestion of warmth, and these softly tinted lanterns add to the overall light of the town below a quality of variety and gentle complexity. So that no two pools of lantern light are quite the same color, and the streets lit by multiple lanterns have a quality of tonal richness, as if the architects of this lighting understood that the eye needs variety to feel comfortable, that uniform illumination, however bright, lacks the quality of lived-in warmth that unevenness provides. In the garden directly below the palace walls the night. Flowers are fully open now. You can tell this even from the balcony, even at this distance, not because you can see the individual flowers in any detail, but because the fragrance has intensified considerably in the past half hour, arriving now in waves of greater concentration and longer duration, the waves beginning to overlap so that there are moments when the scent is nearly continuous, nearly constant. A sustained sweetness in the air that is everywhere at once, and that the breath cannot escape and does not wish to. Jasmine primarily, and beneath the jasmine the heavier sweetness of the white flowers that grow along the lower garden wall. the ones with the broad petals and the deep golden centers, the ones that smell of something you have tried many times to describe and always failed to fully capture, something like honey but without its thickness, something like warm milk but without its heaviness. Something that combines sweetness and warmth and depth in proportions that feel precisely calibrated to produce in the person who smells them a sensation of well-being so complete and so specific that it borders on something almost like recognition, as if the fragrance is reminding you of something you knew before you had a language to know it with, something from a time before memory that the body still carries in some form the mind has no access to. You breathe this fragrance in deeply, filling your lungs with it, and you hold the breath for just a moment, not with effort, not in any deliberate practice, but simply because the breath is so good that the body delays its release, savoring it the way the mouth savors something sweet before swallowing, wanting to extend the moment of contact, to allow the goodness the full duration of attention before letting it go. And then you let it go slowly, completely, and the out-breath carries with it whatever remained of the day's accumulated tension. Whatever the hour on the balcony has not yet released, and you feel the release happen in your chest and in your shoulders and in the space between your shoulder blades where tension gathers when it wants to go unnoticed, and all of it releases on this one long, slow out breath into the fragrant night air. And what remains after the breath is out is a quality of emptiness that is not lack but readiness, not loss but space, the space that the next breath will fill with more of this night air, more of this fragrance. More of this cool and moonlit goodness. The river has changed character under the moonlight. What was in the daytime and in the early evening a silver thread woven into the landscape has become, in the full moonlight, something more luminous and more present. The moon's reflection moves on the water in a long, irregular shimmer, broken and remade continuously by the river's slow current, never the same shape for 2 moments together, but always recognizable, always the moon. Always that particular quality of broken silver light on dark water that painters have tried to capture for as long as there have been painters to try. You watch this shimmer from the balcony and it seems to you, in the peaceful and slightly dissolved state of mind that the evening has brought you to, that there's something almost alive about it, not alive in the way that the birds are alive, not alive in the way that the flowers below are alive, but alive in its own way, the way water is always alive in a way that stone is not. The way moving things are always alive in a way that still things are not. Even when the movement is as gentle and as quiet as the current of this river on this still night, carrying the moon's reflection southward on its surface in the direction of the sea, which is somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond the hills, beyond the further hills, beyond those hills, the sea that you have visited rarely, but always with a sense of arriving somewhere fundamental, somewhere that the land has been pointing toward all along. The land's long drainage toward the low and patient gathering of water at the world's edge. The stone beneath your feet holds your weight with such complete reliability that you have ceased to be aware of it in the ordinary way, the way you cease to be aware of the air that surrounds you when you have been breathing it for long enough, the way the most constant and most reliable things become invisible through their constancy and reliability, known by the body beneath the level of conscious attention. But you allow yourself to become aware of it now, deliberately, with the quality of attention that the balcony has been teaching you all evening. You allow yourself to notice the stone beneath your feet, its coolness, its smoothness, its absolute solidity, its total indifference to time, and in noticing these things you feel them as gifts, feel the stone's patience and durability as something offered to you, something given, something that asks nothing in return except perhaps to be noticed once in a while, to have the attention of a living person resting upon it for a moment, acknowledging the beauty of a thing that persists. Chapter 4, Gradual Slowing. The night has deepened without your marking the progression, the way rivers deepen without your seeing the depth change, one moment knee-high and then waist-high, and then the bottom is not findable with your feet. But the transition from one depth to the next happened in such small increments that you never felt the shift, only the arrival at somewhere deeper than before. The sky above the balcony is now a deep blue that is almost black at the zenith, the darkest and deepest part of the dome directly above you, and the stars at the zenith are the most numerous and the most visible, crowded there at the highest point of the sky in a density that suggests infinite depth, that suggests that behind these stars there are more stars and behind those more still, layered back into a distance that has no end. The universe opening upward in a direction that the eye follows as far as it can follow and then releases, allows to continue beyond the reach of looking, beyond the furthest imaginable distance, into what is simply there and cannot be reduced to something graspable. You look up at this for a long moment, truly up, tilting your head back so that the sky fills your vision and the earth below and the kingdom and the balcony recede to the periphery of your awareness. And there's only the sky, only the stars, only the depth of the night above you, and you feel very small in this moment and very grateful for the smallness. Grateful for the reminder that the world is larger than any single life that passes through it, and that this largeness is not frightening but freeing. That to be small in a large world is not to be diminished, but to be relieved of the impossible burden of containing that world within a single self. You lower your gaze from the zenith and let the kingdom come back into focus, gently, not urgently, the way you return from any journey, the familiar world receiving you back with the same patience with which it let you go. The lanterns in the lower streets have begun, one by one, to be extinguished. This is the second ceremony of the evening lamplighter's. They made their rounds once at dusk to light the lamps, and now, in the deepest part of the night, they make their rounds again to retire them, moving through the streets in the reverse direction of the lighting route, extinguishing the lamps in the neighborhoods where the late walkers are no longer walking, and the streets are empty and the light serves no one, conserving the oil for the hours before dawn when the streets will begin to wake again and the light will be wanted again. You watch this happening now from the balcony, a dimming, gradual and quiet, spreading through the lower quarters of the town as lamp after lamp goes dark, each extinguished lamp leaving its part of the street in a darkness that seems, after the warmth of the lamplight, very complete for a moment and then softens as the eyes adjust and find the moonlight sufficient, the moonlight that fills the gaps where the lanterns were with a quieter and more diffuse illumination. A light that does not pool and concentrate the way lantern light does, but spreads evenly across surfaces, giving everything a uniform and gentle visibility that is enough for the purposes of a town asleep, enough for the night watchmen on their rounds, enough for the occasional late wanderer, enough for the cats that move through the lanes on their silent and purposeful business, enough for all the nighttime needs of a place that has, for the most part, given itself over to darkness and to rest. The extinguishing moves through the town like a slow tide going out, taking with it the amber warmth of the lamp light and leaving behind the cooler, purer silver of the moon. And as this happens, the town below transforms one more time, not dramatically, not shockingly, but with the same gentle continuity that has characterized every transformation of this evening. One thing becoming another through gradations too fine to mark individually, only the endpoints distinguishable. Only the before and the after clearly different, the in-between a smooth and uninterrupted passage. The town that was amber-lit and detailed and particularized by the lanterns becomes, under the moon, something more unified, something whose individual parts, the separate streets, the distinct buildings, the varied rooftops recede somewhat in their particularity and merge into a larger impression. A landscape of silver and shadow, an old town under a full moon, which is a kind of beauty so universal and so ancient that it seems to belong not to any particular civilization, any particular century, but to the entire human experience of night, to every person who has ever stood on a height and looked out over a moonlit world and felt what you're feeling now, which is something without a precise name, something that lies at the intersection of peace and wonder and a very gentle sadness, and something that might be love, if love is what you call the feeling of deep and inarticulate connection to a beautiful world. The garden below has quieted entirely. The last of the birds found their sleeping places long ago, and the garden's nighttime sounds are only the sounds of growing things and water, the fountain still moving in its patient circle, the leaves of the old trees shifting in the barely there night air with a sound like very distant whispering, the occasional small sound that might be an insect or might be a leaf falling or might be nothing at all, the ear finding patterns in the quiet the way the eye finds shapes in clouds. The mind always reaching toward meaning even in its most relaxed state, always gently sorting the world into signal and background, always attending, always slightly ahead of experience, always leaning into the next moment even in the deepest rest. But even this reaching, this attending has softened in you tonight to a level so minimal that it is barely present. You are aware that you are aware, and that is nearly all, a thin layer of consciousness resting on the surface of an enormous quiet, the way a single leaf rests on the surface of a still pool, present but barely disturbing the water beneath it, belonging to the surface without possessing it. The marble of the balcony floor is, at this hour, entirely of the moon. The warmth of the day's sun that it held into the evening has been gradually released over the past hours, released upward into the air, into the night, into the sky, and what remains in the stone now is the cooler presence of moonlight and night air. And the stone feels different under your feet at this temperature, different from how it felt when you first came out to the balcony, and it was warm with the memory of afternoon. It feels more purely itself at this temperature, more fully mineral, more fully the thing it is, stone, old stone, patient stone, stone that will be here when the palace has changed beyond recognition, and the kingdom has taken forms that no one here can yet imagine, and the balcony has been walked upon. Generations upon generations of feet, each pair of feet carrying its own life, its own evening, its own particular experience of standing here and looking out at whatever the world looks like from this place in that particular future time. And yet the stone will feel the same under all those feet, the same coolness, the same smoothness, the same faint roughness at the carved edges, the same quality of patient solidity, the same complete reliability, and something in this continuity is deeply comforting. Something in the durability of stone is a comfort that is different from any human comfort, comfort that does not speak or hold or offer warmth, but simply is, simply persists, simply remains, and the remaining is itself a form of care. The night air at your face is cool now, fully cool, the coolness of deep night rather than early evening, the coolness that reminds the body of its warmth by contrasting with it, making the warm interior of the body more perceptible, more present, more clearly felt. Your face registers this coolness, and your cheeks are cool under it, and your forehead is cool, and the skin of your hands resting on the balustrade is cool. But beneath the shawl and beneath the light garment you wear, your body is warm, reliably and completely warm, the warmth of a living body maintaining itself against the night, and this warmth feels precious at this hour, feels like something to be noticed and appreciated, the simple and extraordinary fact of warmth. The body's perpetual generation of heat from the slow burning of life, the metabolic fire that never goes out as long as there is life, that burns low in sleep and higher in activity but never reaches zero, never allows the body to become the temperature of the air around it, maintaining always this margin of warmth that is both biological fact and something more, something that the coldness of the night air makes available to feel as something more, as the particular and irreducible warmth of being alive. The fountain below continues its sound, and at this hour the sound has become almost everything. In the daytime and in the early evening, the fountain's sound was one element among many, present and pleasant but not dominant, threaded through the tapestry of other sounds without overwhelming any of them. But now, with the town deeply quiet and the streets empty and the voices long since stilled, and even the ambient murmur of inhabited space reduced to its lowest possible register, the fountain asserts itself gently into the silence, not aggressively, not loudly, but as a presence, as a voice that speaks when all the other voices have gone quiet, and speaks not in words but in the continuous and variable sound of water in motion. And what it says, if it says anything, is something about continuity, about the uninterrupted nature of flowing things, about the way certain processes simply continue regardless of whether anyone is attending to them, regardless of whether it is day or night, regardless of whether the world is noisy or quiet, simply continuing, simply flowing, the water entering the basin and leaving the basin and being replaced by more water in an endless cycle that has no beginning and no end that can be identified from within the cycle itself. Only the cycle, only the flow. Only the sound of water being water in the way that only water can be. Your breath has slowed to something barely faster than the rhythm of deep sleep. You notice this and you do not comment on it, even internally. You simply allow the noticing to pass through you the way all the other noticings of this long and beautiful evening have passed through you, without holding, without analysis, without any response other than the simple acknowledgement of being aware, of being present, of being here in this moment which is its own complete world, lacking nothing, requiring nothing, asking only that you remain in it for as long as it lasts. The moon has moved through the sky as moons do, slowly, without apparent motion when you are watching, and then clearly moved when you compare its position now to its position when it rose, when it was at the horizon and large and close seeming and suffused with the warmth of the Earth's atmosphere, and now it is higher and smaller seeming and cooler and more distant and more purely itself, a white disk in a dark sky giving light without heat, illuminating without warming, present without being near. The kind of presence that asks nothing of you and offers everything it is simply by being visible, simply by riding its ancient arc across the sky night after night in the same reliable pattern that your great-grandmother's great-grandmother watched from this same hill, perhaps from this same stone, perhaps with the same quality of upward-looking wonder that you feel now, the wonder that the moon reliably produces in. Upward-looking faces, a wonder so consistent across human experience that it must be something close to instinctual, must be something laid down in the earliest layers of the human response to beauty, the moon response, the face tilting upward in the dark response, ancient and undiminished. The shawl has become very comfortable around you now, truly comfortable in the way that comfort is only available to a body that has fully surrendered to it, that has stopped holding itself away from comfort, and has simply allowed the comfort to be fully received. The weight of the wool on your shoulders and across your chest and around your upper arms is exactly the right weight, not so heavy as to feel constraining, not so light as to feel insufficient, exactly the right amount of warmth and weight and soft pressure to produce in the body the sensation of being gently and adequately held. And this sensation has been working on you all evening without your quite noticing it, slowly and gently reducing the activation in your nervous system to its lowest sustainable level. Slowly and gently telling your body that everything is well, that you are safe and warm and held, that the world outside the shawl is cool and beautiful and well-ordered, and requires nothing of you at this hour. That the only appropriate action available to you right now is to be warm within the shawl and cool at the face, and completely here on the marble balcony with the moon above, and the sleeping kingdom below, and the stars thick in the zenith overhead, and the fragrance of the night flowers rising from the garden below in long, sweet, almost continuous waves. The lanterns of the middle streets are out now. The town in the distance, the market district, the artisan quarters, the residential neighborhoods beyond the garden is mostly dark, or rather mostly moonlit. The lanterns retired for the night and the streets given over entirely to the silver light of the moon. And in this light the town has a different kind of beauty than it has in the day or in the early evening. Beauty that is more abstract, more simplified, more like the essence of town than any actual town, the roof lines against the sky. The dark blocks of buildings, the pale surfaces of plaster walls catching the moon, the deep shadows in doorways and beneath overhanging balconies and along the north-facing sides of narrow streets. And in this simplification there is a kind of peace. That feels very deep, very final for the evening, the town having arrived at the end of its visible day and surrendered now fully to the dark and to the rest. And the rest is complete, and it is everywhere, and it has the quality of something accepted rather than imposed, the quality of a world that knows its own rhythms and follows them willingly. That goes to sleep not because it must, but because the evening has been long and good, and the darkness is welcome, and the rest is deserved, and the morning will come again with its own light, and its own calls to activity and its own particular pleasures. But that is for the morning, that is for another time, and this time is the time of the moon and the marble and the silence and the slow, soft breathing of a world at rest. You can feel sleep approaching you the way you have felt it approach many times, but rarely with such completeness, rarely with such an unobstructed path toward you. Usually there is something in the way, some task undone or thought unfinished or worry unresolved that sleep must work its way around, finding the back paths and the gaps in the wakefulness to arrive at you sideways, in the small hours, after the mind has exhausted its agenda and allowed rest to come. But tonight here sleep is approaching in a more direct way, in a way that has the quality of something simply arriving, something that has been on its way all evening and is now, after the long and beautiful preparation of this balcony and this sky and this kingdom and this air, simply arriving as naturally and as inevitably as the tide arrives, as the moon arrived earlier, as the night itself arrived, without hurry, without drama, without asking permission, simply the next thing in the natural order of things. The thing that comes after the day and after the evening and after the standing on the balcony watching the moon and the lanterns and the sleeping town, the thing that comes after all of this beauty has been received and held and allowed to do its work of calming and slowing and deepening. The thing that is simply sleep, simply rest, simply the long and restoring dark. Your eyes are heavy now, not the heaviness of effort or of struggle against sleep, but the heaviness of completion, of a body that has been given exactly what it needed and has received it fully, and is now ready to let the receiving become something still more receptive, still more open, still more surrendered. To the quiet and the dark, the view before you is still beautiful, still the marble, still the stars, still the moonlit town, still the silver river, still the dark hills, and the beauty is fully present and fully received even through the heaviness of the eyes. The way music is fully received even when the body is very still. The way fragrance is fully received even when the mind is already beginning to slow toward dream. The night flowers below release another wave of scent, long and sweet and complete, and it rises to you on the cool air and passes over you and through you and leaves behind it, as it always does, the gentle anticipation of its return, the expectation of sweetness that is itself sweet. The marble is cool and smooth. The stars are thick in the zenith. The fountain sounds in the garden below, continuous and patient and very far away now, as far away as the beginning of the evening, which also feels very far away now, further than an evening's length, further than a few hours. It feels like a long journey this evening on the balcony, a journey of arriving and looking and breathing and receiving and slowly, slowly, in the most gradual and comfortable way, becoming less and less of the day's self and more of the night's self. The self that does not need to hold or manage or attend, but only to be, only to rest, only to allow the great dark of sleep to come the rest of the way on its patient approach, and to receive it when it arrives with the same willingness and the same gratitude with which you receive the evening air, the lantern light, the fragrance of the flowers, the moonlight on the marble, all the gifts of this long and beautiful evening that has brought you here to this threshold, to this edge between waking and sleep. This most comfortable and most familiar of all the edges the day offers. Chapter 5, Dissolving into Silence. There is a moment that happens at the edge of sleep, a moment you can only know in retrospect, because to know it in the present would be to pull yourself back from it. When the world simplifies itself entirely, when all the detail and complexity and texture and depth of the waking world contracts into a single quality, a single sensation, a single awareness that contains everything and requires nothing. And from that single awareness, the passage into sleep is not a further step, but a final. Effortless dissolution, a letting go so. Complete that the distinction between you and the quiet simply ceases to be maintained. The boundary between the one who is experiencing and the thing being experienced becomes too subtle to locate. And what remains, if remains is even the right word, is the quiet itself, is the dark itself, is the rest that does not know it is rest because there is no longer any wakefulness to define it against. You are very near this moment now. Not at it, not yet, but very near, near enough to feel its approach the way you feel the approach of sleep in the body, the heaviness in the limbs, the softening of the muscles around the eyes, the slowing of the thoughts that have been moving through you all evening like the slow current of a river, thoughts without urgency or destination, thoughts that are more like the passage of light on water than like deliberate mental work. And now even these slow and purposeless thoughts are growing still, settling to the bottom. The river of thought approaching its final stillness of the night. The balcony is here, you are here. The marble is beneath your feet, cool and smooth and entirely reliable. The shawl is around your shoulders, warm and soft and sufficient. The night air is at your face, cool and fragrant with the last waves of night flower scent that continue to rise from the garden below with a faithfulness that feels, in your present state of softened perception, like a kind of love. The flowers offering their fragrance not because they are attended to, but simply because it is their nature to offer it. The offering unconditional and continuous and needing no recipient to be complete. You breathe the fragrance in slowly, deeply, your lungs expanding with a fullness that reaches the very bottom of them, and you breathe it out, the breath leaving you completely and slowly, emptying you gently and completely in the way that the best sleeps empty you, the way that the deepest rest empties the body of its held things and leaves in their place a spaciousness that is the ground condition of renewal. The empty room that sleep will fill with its quiet work of repair and restoration. The moon is high now, higher than it was, smaller seeming in the deeper sky, more purely white, more purely itself, shedding its clear and impartial light across the entire landscape below the balcony, the sleeping town, the quiet garden, the pale curves of the fountain basin, the silver thread of the distant river, the dark and rounded hills at the edge of the world, all of it held in the moon's patient and indifferent illumination. All of it beautiful in the way that things are beautiful at their most quiet and their most still, beautiful in the way that sleeping things are beautiful, the way a sleeping city is more purely a city than a waking one, the way sleep reveals the essential nature of things by removing the overlay of activity and noise and the thousand urgent expressions of the day. You look at this landscape, this moonlit world, and your looking has by now lost most of the intentionality it had earlier in the evening. You are not really looking in the active sense, not directing your attention at specific details or moving your gaze from one feature to the next with any purpose or plan, but rather you are allowing the landscape to be present to your open eyes, allowing the beauty to arrive rather than pursuing it. And the difference between these two modes of seeing is the difference between the day's mode and the night's mode. the difference between doing and receiving, and you are entirely in the receiving now, entirely in the open and permissive mode of a person who has set down everything they were carrying and discovered that their hands are not empty, but full of something they couldn't have been carrying while they were carrying the other things, full of this, full of now. Full of the moonlit world and the cool air and the marble beneath their feet and the shawl around their shoulders and the sound of the fountain far below, continuous and soft and without beginning or end. The sound of the fountain. You let your attention rest there on the sound of the fountain, the way attention rests on sounds in the approach to sleep, lightly, without grasping, allowing the sound to be itself without needing to do anything with it, without analyzing its pitch or its rhythm or its quality, simply allowing it to be present in your awareness the way a sound simply is present when you're not resisting it or pursuing it, simply receiving it. The water and its sound arriving in your ears as a gift that asks only that you be still enough to receive it, and you are still enough, you are completely still enough. Your body has arrived at a stillness so complete that the sound of your own breathing has become as soft and as regular as the sound of the fountain, the two sounds in a slow and comfortable relation to each other, your breath and the fountain's water, two forms of continuous motion, two forms of the same kind of patient, rhythmic persistence that the night asks of all things within it. The stars above you burn with the quiet constancy that is their defining quality, not flickering, not varying, not doing anything that could be called active, simply there, simply present at their distances, each one a sun at a distance so great that its light reaches you as only this, a point of brightness in the dark, precise and unchanging and absolutely reliable, and this reliability is itself a kind of comfort, the comfort of things that do not vary. Things that you can look up and find where you left them, night after night, the same points of light and the same relationships to each other, the same patterns drawn by human imagination across the same distances, the same sky that your ancestors looked up at from this same hill and that your descendants will look up at long after everything else about this place and this time has changed beyond recognition, only the sky unchanged, only the stars still burning in their ancient position. Only the moon riding its ancient arc, patient and silver and entirely indifferent to the human dramas playing out beneath it, the human loves and human griefs and human celebrations, the human babies being born and the human elders departing, the human buildings rising and falling, all of it held beneath the same patient sky that has seen all of it before and will see all of it again, and is neither saddened nor gladdened by any of it but simply present, simply illuminating, simply there. And you here on the marble of the balcony, in the warmth of the shawl, in the cool of the night air, in the sound of the fountain and the fragrance of the night flowers and the moonlight that falls on everything including you, touching your face with its cool and impartial light, illuminating you the way it illuminates the marble and the fountain basin and the rooftops of the sleeping town. You are part of all of this, you belong to all of this. The moonlight does not distinguish between the stone it falls on and the person it falls on. The night air does not vary its coolness for the marble versus the skin. The fragrance does not choose between the living and the carved. The fountain's sound does not reach the ears of the wakeful more sweetly than it reaches the ears of the sleeping, all of it given equally, all of it offered without condition, all of it simply the world being itself, the night being itself, the quiet being itself, and you being yourself within all of it, resting within all of it, softening into all of it with the slow and complete willingness of a thing finding its right place. A thing settling into the exact position that was made for it, the exact rest that was waiting for it at the end of exactly this long and beautiful day. The last few lamps in the upper town are going out now, one by one, and each one that goes darkens its small corner of the world below and brightens the moon's portion by comparison. And with each extinguished lamp, the town becomes a little more deeply itself in the dark, a little more purely asleep, a little more fully surrendered to the rest that has been building all evening in the way that all of the evening has been building, everything moving in the same direction, everything flowing toward this. Toward the quiet, toward the dark, toward the deep rest that the world takes every night and that you are being carried toward, gently and inevitably, by everything that surrounds you. Your breath is the sound of a sleeping sea. Your weight on the marble is the weight of trust, the body trusting the stone trusting the earth beneath it, the earth trusting its own solidity, everything trusting everything in a chain of quiet confidence that goes all the way down as the rock goes, as far down as the deep water goes, all the way to the center of the world, which is also, somehow here, also right here, also in the soles of your feet on the warm becoming cool marble. Also in the palms of your hands on the smooth stone of the balustrade, also in the center of your chest where your heart beats slowly and reliably, and with complete and unquestioning commitment to continuing, to persisting, to maintaining its quiet rhythm through all the sleeping hours to come. The night flowers send their fragrance one more time. It arrives as a wave, long and sweet and complete, jasmine and something heavier, something ancient and warm, and it fills the air around you and it fills your lungs with the next breath, and it passes through you and it leaves behind it a sweetness that the air retains for a moment, a sweetness that the night retains, a sweetness that this balcony and this hour and this marble and this moonlight retain so. That everything around you for just this moment is touched by it, is slightly sweeter than it was before the fragrance arrived. And then the wave passes and the air returns to its cool and quiet self, and the fountain is still there, and the moon is still there, and the stars are still there, and the marble is still there, and the shawl is warm, and the night is deep, and everything is well. Everything is entirely and completely and unreservedly well. You will go inside soon. Not yet, but soon. The thought moves through you without urgency, without any pull toward action, simply the knowledge that the evening is complete, that the balcony has given you everything it has to give tonight, and you have received everything it has offered, the full gift of the evening from its first amber warmth to this final silver quiet, and the receiving is complete, and the completion is its own form of rest, a rounding of something that began when you first came through the gauze curtain and felt the evening air at your face, and is ending now in this deep and moonlit quiet, this state of such complete and effortless stillness that sleep is no longer something approaching but something arrived, something already here, already doing its gentle work in the body, even as the body still stands on the marble of the balcony, even as the eyes still look out softly over the moonlit world, even as the hands still rest on the cool stone of the balustrade. The town below is dark and sleeping and beautiful. The river moves in the distance, silver in the moonlight, carrying the reflection of stars toward the south. The hills stand at the edge of the world in their quiet, rounded way, neither near nor far, simply there, as they have always been, as they will always be. The garden below breathes its fragrant breathing, the night flowers open in offering, the old trees still with their old and patient stillness, the fountain sounding its continuous soft sound, the sound of water in motion in the dark, the sound that has been sounding all through this evening and will sound all through this night and will be sounding in the morning when the light returns and the birds begin and the town begins to stir and everything begins again. But that is the morning, and the morning belongs to itself. And this night belongs to itself, and this moment belongs entirely to itself, to the marble and the moon and the stars and the quiet and the sleeping world and the fragrance of the night flowers and the sound of the fountain and the cool air and the warm shawl and the slow breath and the heavy eyes and the deep and ready dark. The balcony is still. The moon is high. The night holds everything in its large and patient hands, gently without pressure, the way the most tender care is given, not by holding tightly but by surrounding completely, not by grasping but by encompassing, and everything within this encompassing is held, is safe, is warm, is resting. Is deeply and entirely at rest in the way that things are at rest when there is nothing left to do, and nowhere else to be, and nothing remaining to attend to except the extraordinary and ordinary beauty of being alive on a marble balcony under a full moon with the kingdom sleeping below and the stars thick in the zenith above, and the fragrance of night flowers in the air and the sound of water in the garden, and the shawl warm around the shoulders and the stone cool beneath the feet and the breath slow in the heart. Slow and the mind slow and the body heavy with the comfortable weight of a long and beautiful and completed day. You close your eyes. The moonlight is still there behind the eyelids, a faint warm rose-white glow that pulses very gently with the heartbeat. Once and then again, slower each time, slower and softer and more diffuse, the pulse of light becoming less and less distinct from the darkness around it, the boundary between light and dark behind the closed eyelids softening and dissolving the way all boundaries soften and dissolve at this depth of rest, the way the boundary between the balcony and the night has dissolved. Between the person and the quiet, between the waking and the sleep, everything becoming softer and less defined and more like one thing, more like a single quality of being that has no inside or outside, no here or there, no self or world, only this, only the quiet, only the deep and fragrant dark, only the sound of water somewhere far below, only the moon somewhere above, only the stars in their patient thousands, only the sleeping world, only the rest. The fountain sounds, the moon rides, the marble holds, the night flowers breathe. And you are held within all of it, and all of it is held within you, and there is no difference between these two things, and the knowing of no difference is the last thing, and after the last thing there is nothing to know and nothing to say and nothing to hold and nothing to release, only the deep and total and completely sufficient quiet of the night, the palace, the balcony and the stone and the moon and the dark and the slow breathing of a world at rest. A world that has arrived at where it was always going, at the end of its long and beautiful day, at the beginning of its long and beautiful rest, at the place where the story ends and the dream begins, and the dream is already here. The dream has been here all along. The dream is the moonlight and the fountain and the fragrance and the marble and the shawl and the cool air and the warm body and the slow heart and the closed eyes and the deep, deep quiet that is not an absence but a presence, the most complete presence, the presence of everything at rest, the presence of the world held gently in the dark, the presence that needs no name because it is here, it has always been here. It will always be here in the quiet and the dark. In the deep and dreamless and deeply dreaming night, the kingdom sleeps, and you sleep within the kingdom. And the moon is above, and the marble is below, and the stars are everywhere, and the night is complete, and the rest is deep, and the world is beautiful, and all is well, and all is well, and all is well.